There's a specific kind of exhaustion no one talks about. It's not from doing too much. It's from carrying things that don't need to be carried. By yourself. When no one asked you to. Your mind does something no one sees. It runs a constant background process, always calculating, always preparing. What's the worst that could happen? What's unfinished? What's about to go wrong? What do I need to solve before I can rest? It's not anxiety exactly. It's deeper than that. It's a kind of vigilance that never fully turns off. Like your nervous system learned somewhere that being caught off guard was dangerous. So you never let yourself be caught. Here's the layer most people miss. When you figure things out alone, you're not just solving problems. You're running an experiment. Every time you handle something yourself, your brain logs it. I can do this. I don't need anyone. And that data reinforces a theory you've been building your whole life. A theory that says the safest place to be is inside your own capability. But here's what the experiment never tests. What happens when someone shows up for you? You have no data on that. You've never collected it. Because needing someone else always felt like a risk you couldn't afford. So when you finally ask for help, and you do eventually, you ask from a place of depletion, almost apologetic, like you're asking for permission rather than offering an invitation. I could technically do this myself, but can I lean on you anyway? There's a quiet negotiation happening underneath. You're proving you tried, that you exhausted your own options, that the help isn't really needed, it's just wanted. But it is needed, and that's not weakness. That's just the truth. And the truth doesn't need to be earned first. The first layer is this. You learned that asking for help was expensive. Maybe the people around you were inconsistent. Maybe they made you feel like a burden. Maybe your needs were just inconvenient. And so your brain did what brilliant, adaptive brains do. It found a workaround. It made you capable of handling things without waiting for someone else. Not because you wanted to, because it felt necessary. Your nervous system treated self-reliance like a survival skill, and it became one. Psychologists sometimes call this hypervigilance, though that word feels too clinical for what it actually is. It's more like your mind keeps too many tabs open, always watching for something that might go wrong, always prepared to handle it before anyone else has to step in. You didn't just learn to be independent. You learned that depending on others was a vulnerability you couldn't afford. And here's what most people miss. You're not avoiding people because you don't like them. You're avoiding the feeling that comes after accepting help. That quiet sense that you somehow fell short. That you needed something you should have been able to provide for yourself. Your brain learned to skip that feeling entirely. Easier to just do it. But there's another layer. You don't just solve problems for yourself. You solve problems for others too. You overfunction. You overgive. You take on things that were never yours to carry because something in you needs to be needed. And underneath that need is something almost sacred. The belief that if you stop solving, you stop mattering. This is where it gets dangerous. When you solve for others what they could solve themselves, you think you're being supportive. But you're actually teaching them to depend on you, and teaching yourself that your worth lives in what you produce. Eventually, you become indispensable to everyone around you and completely exhausted by yourself. You're also building something else without realizing it. When you figure things out alone, you're building a world with no witnesses. And in a world with no witnesses, no one sees your process, your struggle, your evolution. They only see the finished version. Polished, controlled, impressive. And you start to believe that's all you deserve to be, witnessed only in your competence, never in your confusion, never in the raw human mess of trying. You're protecting yourself from being seen at your most uncertain. But you're also preventing yourself from being known at all. Research on emotional processing shows something interesting. The people who self-reliance the most are often the ones who feel most deeply. You're not detached. You're not cold. You're just afraid that if you let yourself feel everything out loud, you'll need something you can't provide for yourself. And that fear is not a character flaw. It's a scar. It came from somewhere real. Most people think this pattern means you don't trust others. It doesn't. It means you don't trust the version of yourself that exists when you're not solving anything. The version that's just present, just held, just okay without having to prove it. That's the self you've been working so hard to protect. And maybe that's the experiment worth trying. Not to become more independent, but to find out who you are when independence isn't the goal. There's a difference between choosing to handle something alone and being unable to stop. One is a capability, the other is a cage. They look identical from the outside. One leaves you whole, the other leaves you depleted. If you're not sure which one you're living in, ask yourself this. When was the last time you received help and felt relief? Not debt, not gratitude that felt transactional, just relief. The kind that says, I needed this. I'm glad I don't have to carry it alone. If that feeling is hard to access, there's work to do. But there's something else happening too. When you figure things out alone, you control the story. You control the timing, the reveal, the narrative. No one sees your confusion or your process, only the result. You're protected from being misunderstood, from having your effort unrecognized, from being vulnerable in front of someone who might not care. But you're also living without witnesses. And in a world without witnesses, you start to believe you don't deserve to be seen in your rawness. You don't know how to be witnessed, and that becomes its own kind of loneliness. The paradox is this. The very thing that kept you safe is the thing that keeps you lonely. You built walls to protect yourself from needing, but needing is what connects you to other people. The walls worked, and now they are the thing. Here's the truth no one talks about. You learned to figure things out alone because that was the only version of safety your nervous system knew how to build. The people who should have been your shelter weren't always reliable, so you built it yourself, inside your own skull, with your own rules, your own supply chain, your own exit routes. And there is something almost beautiful about that. You became reliable to yourself. That is no small thing. But here's what the beauty hides. Reliability and intimacy live in different worlds. The more you practice one, the less you practice the other. You're not emotionally unavailable. You're just afraid of what it costs to be otherwise. And that fear is not a character flaw. It is a scar. And scars can heal. There is a version of you that never had to earn the right to exist, that was never tested, that was never pushed to become their own shelter. That version still exists underneath everything you've built. And maybe, eventually, you let that version come out. You don't have to keep earning it. You can let people help you. You always could.